My name is Nellie, and for as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the world around me in ways that seem to perplex my family. While Emma, my sister, played with dolls and dreamed of being a princess, I collected leaves, rocks, and anything else I could examine under the little magnifying glass I'd gotten from a cereal box. "Mom, why do leaves change color in fall?" I'd ask, holding up a particularly vibrant maple leaf I'd found. "Ask your teacher, Nellie. I'm busy helping Emma with her dance costume," she'd reply, barely glancing my way. This was a common response to my endless stream of questions about nature and science. I remember one particular afternoon when I was 7, sitting at our kitchen table with various household items spread out before me. I'd been mixing baking soda with different liquids, fascinated by the reactions. "What in heaven's name are you doing?" Mom's voice cut through my concentration. "Look at this mess. Clean this up right now. Your sister has her friends coming over for her birthday party, and I need the kitchen." Ah yes, Emma's birthday parties. They were always grand affairs with entertainers, life-sized cartoon characters, and dozens of guests. Mine, on the other hand, were quiet affairs with just my grandparents and a simple cake. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. "Here's your birthday present, sweetheart," Dad would say, handing me another volume of the science encyclopedia. Don't get me wrong, I loved those books. But watching Emma unwrap her mountain of toys and gadgets at her parties made it clear where our parents' attention truly lay. Thank goodness for my grandparents, Dad's parents. They were my sanctuary, my escape from the constant reminder that I was the odd one out in our family. Every weekend and school holiday, they'd welcome me into their home with open arms. "Tell me more about what you've learned this week, little scientist," Grandpa would say, his eyes twinkling with genuine interest as I rattled off my latest discoveries. Emma never came with me to our grandparents'. "They're so boring," she'd complain. "Besides, Mom and Dad are taking me to the new theme park this weekend." I'd watch from the window as they drove away, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. "Why can't I go too?" I once asked. "Oh, honey," Mom said, patting my head absently. "You wouldn't enjoy it. You'd probably just want to study the mechanics of the rides instead of having fun." So that's how it was. Emma was the normal one, the one who fit their image of what a daughter should be. And I was the one who asked too many questions, who preferred microscopes to makeup, who didn't quite belong. Things changed when I started middle school. My science teacher, Mrs. Peterson, was the first person outside my grandparents who seemed to truly see me. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, your daughter has extraordinary potential," she told my parents during a parent-teacher conference. I was sitting outside the classroom, but I could hear everything clearly. I've never seen a student grasp complex scientific concepts so naturally. "We need to discuss transferring Nellie to our gifted program." "Gifted program?" Mom's voice had that dismissive tone I knew too well. "That sounds rather complicated. She's doing fine where she is. Besides, we have to consider Emma. It wouldn't be fair to give Nellie special treatment." I sat there, my heart sinking. Of course they'd say no. They always said no when it came to me. But then Grandma found out about it. The next day, she marched into my school like a general going to war. I'll never forget how she stood in the principal's office, her voice firm and unwavering. "My granddaughter will take those tests, and she will have every opportunity she deserves. I don't care what her parents said. But Mrs. Walker, we need parental consent. I'll handle my son and his wife. You just make sure Nellie gets her chance." And somehow, she did it. After a week of intense discussions, and I suspect some financial incentives from my grandparents, my parents finally agreed to let me take the placement tests. I passed them all with flying colors. Suddenly, my world expanded. The gifted program opened doors I never knew existed. International science competitions, academic olympiads, research seminars, I threw myself into all of it. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who got excited about the same things I did. I won my first international competition with a project about sustainable ecosystems. Then another, and another. Where should we put this one? Grandpa would ask each time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. In the box with the others, I'd say, pulling out my special cardboard box from under the bed. I never displayed my awards, partly because I didn't want to seem boastful, but mostly because I knew they made my parents uncomfortable. Emma, of course, had her own take on my success. Nobody likes a know-it-all, she'd sneer, but then turn around and say, "Hey, can you help me with my science homework? And maybe just do it for me?" "Emma, that's cheating," I'd protest. "Nellie, help your sister right now," Mom would inevitably command. Family helps family. So I'd end up doing Emma's work, feeling like a fraud, but too afraid to stand up to my parents. It became a pattern. Emma would demand, my parents would insist, and I would comply. I often overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their whispered conversations floated up the stairs to my room, where I'd sit with my chemistry set or the latest research paper I was studying. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke, but the undertone of seriousness in his voice hurt more than if he'd meant it as a pure jest. One evening, after I'd won another science competition, I heard Dad's voice from his study. He was talking to Emma about her struggling grades. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Emma whined. "Listen, sweetheart," Dad's voice softened. "The weak need to be supported. That's why we focus on you. Nellie, well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, fighting back tears. They thought they were justifying their neglect with twisted logic, as if being capable somehow meant I didn't need love or support. At school, I was that weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the laboratory instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people would come to me for help with their science homework, but real friendships? Those were rare. Grandma and Grandpa were my rocks. They'd listen for hours as I explained my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. "Look what I found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out scientific journals or new equipment for my experiments. "I thought this might interest you." But despite having my grandparents' support, the hole in my heart where my parents' love should have been felt vast and empty. I'd watch other families at school events, parents proudly hugging their kids, siblings supporting each other, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that would change everything. I was graduating early. At 16, I'd completed all my high school requirements and had been offered a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. The campus was buzzing with energy, and for once, I wasn't the odd one out. In my advanced chemistry class, I met Sarah and Michael, who got just as excited about molecular structures as I did. For the first time in my life, I had friends who understood me. We'd spend hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, getting excited about discoveries that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But even as I thrived in my new environment, a part of me still yearned for my family's approval. I'd call home weekly, hoping for more than the brief, disinterested conversations I usually got. "Yes, Nellie, that's nice," Mom would say when I tried to tell her about my research. "Oh, did you hear about Emma's new job? She's working at that fancy boutique downtown." I didn't know it then, but my time at university was the calm before the storm. It happened during one of my routine calls home. I was in the middle of my second semester, deep into my research project, when Mom's voice caught my attention. "And with your father's condition getting worse," she was saying to Dad, probably thinking I was on mute. "What about Grandpa?" I interrupted, my heart suddenly racing. "Mom, what's wrong with him?" There was a pause, too long to be innocent. "Oh, Nellie, I didn't realize you were still there. It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering." "I'm coming home," I said immediately, already mentally calculating the fastest route. "I can be there by tomorrow morning." "No, no, don't be ridiculous," Mom's voice turned sharp. "You need to focus on your studies. Emma is helping them out. Everything's under control." Something felt off about her tone, but I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Still, I called Grandma right after. "Oh yes, dear," Grandma said, her voice oddly distant. "Emma's been such a help. She comes by often to check on your grandfather." Emma? The same sister who used to say visiting our grandparents was boring? Something wasn't adding up. 2 weeks later, I stood at my grandparents' familiar front door, my heart pounding with anticipation. But instead of Grandma's warm welcome, I found Emma blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her face a mask of fake surprise. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma." "How is he?" "No one's home," she said quickly, too quickly. "They're out." "Out? Grandpa's sick." "Where would they go?" "I don't know, Nellie. Just go away." She started to close the door. "Wait." I put my foot in the doorway. "Let me come in and wait for them." I said no one's home. She shut the door hard against my foot. "God, you're so annoying. Just leave." Confused and hurt, I tried calling Grandma. Straight to voicemail. This wasn't like her at all. She always kept her phone on for me. With nowhere else to go, I headed to my parents' house, hoping for answers. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen when I arrived. "What are you doing home?" Dad asked, not even trying to hide his annoyance. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma, but they're not home. Emma wouldn't let me in." "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, exchanging a look with Dad. "We were going to tell you, your grandparents are in a nursing home." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "It was a quick decision," Dad said smoothly. "They needed specialized care. It's better this way." "Which nursing home?" "I want to visit them." "They're under quarantine right now," Mom said quickly. "No visitors allowed." "Maybe next time." Eventually, I did go back to university, but something felt terribly wrong. I tried to focus on my lab work, but my mind kept circling back to that afternoon at their door, to Emma's hostile face, to my parents' too smooth explanations. That terrible call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of an experiment when my phone lit up with Mom's number. The fluorescent lights of the university lab hummed above me as my heart started racing. Something about the timing of this call felt ominous. "Nellie," she said, her voice oddly flat. "Your grandfather passed away last night." The test tube I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the empty lab like a gunshot. "What? No, when's the funeral?" My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Thursday at 2 p.m. Don't be late." The way she said it felt strange, almost rehearsed. I didn't even bother cleaning up the broken glass. I rushed out of the lab, my mind spinning with grief and confusion. My beloved grandfather, gone. No chance to say goodbye, no final words of wisdom from the man who had believed in me my whole life. I took the first flight I could get, spending the entire journey trying to hold back tears as memories of him flooded my mind. At 1:30 p.m., I made my way to the church. The empty parking lot was my first clue that something was terribly wrong. My footsteps echoed in the silent building as I approached the entrance, dread building with each step. Inside, a custodian was methodically cleaning the floors. "The Walker funeral?" he asked when I inquired, looking up from his work. "That ended hours ago. They held it at 10 a.m. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world started spinning around me as I grabbed onto a nearby pew for support. Frantically, I pulled out my phone and called my parents. "Oh, Nellie," Mom's voice dripped with disappointment. "You must have mixed up the times. We clearly said 10 a.m. "No," I said firmly, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "You said 2 p.m., I wrote it down." "I know you said 2 p.m. Where's Grandma?" "I need to talk to her." "Your grandmother is still in the nursing home," Dad cut in. "And she doesn't want to see you right now. She's very upset you missed the funeral." I told my parents I was heading back to university, but my feet had other plans. I found myself driving to my grandparents' house, desperate for answers, for some kind of explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. The familiar street looked exactly the same, the old oak tree, the carefully tended garden, the wind chimes Grandma loved so much. My hands were trembling as I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door opened, and there stood Grandma, the same Grandma who was supposedly in a nursing home, refusing to see me. Grandma! I moved to hug her, relief flooding through me at the sight of her familiar face. But she stepped back, and the look in her eyes stopped me cold. Her face was hard and unfamiliar, like she was looking at a stranger instead of her granddaughter. So now you decide to show up? Her voice was cold, nothing like the warm tones that had comforted me throughout my childhood. Grandma, what's going on? They told me you were in a nursing home. The words tumbled out as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Don't. She held up her hand, and the gesture felt like a physical blow. Your grandfather called you over and over. He was asking for you on his deathbed, wanting to say goodbye to his little scientist. But you couldn't be bothered to answer his calls or visit him. How could you be so cruel, Nellie? Let me see the number he was calling, I said, my voice barely steady. Please, Grandma. I need to understand this. Grandma disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a small notepad. Her hands were shaking as she showed me the number scribbled in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. That's not my number, I whispered, staring at the unfamiliar digits. I've had the same number since high school. They gave you a fake number? What do you mean, fake number? Grandma's stern expression began to crack. Your parents said you changed it when you went to university. They said you wanted to distance yourself from us. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Grandma, I came here during break. Emma was here, she wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Grandma's face went pale. Nursing home? We never. Emma and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life to visit. They said, her voice cracked, they said you were ashamed of us, that we weren't sophisticated enough for you anymore. They said what? My knees felt weak. How could they? Grandma, they told me the funeral was at 2 p.m. today. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I mixed up the times, but I didn't. I would never. The funeral was at 10 a.m., Grandma said slowly, realization dawning in her eyes. Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you couldn't even be bothered to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Emma was crying about how she'd tried so hard to reach you. I fell into her arms then, both of us dissolving into tears on the front porch. All the pain, all the confusion, all the manufactured distance between us poured out as we held each other. He died thinking I abandoned him, I sobbed into her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Shoo, Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. We know the truth now. We know. After we dried our tears, Grandma picked up the phone with a determined look on her face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice was steel when she spoke. Linda? Yes, it's me. I need you, Robert, and Emma to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. No, it can't wait. They'll be here in an hour, Grandma said, hanging up the phone. I told them I had important documents to discuss. The lawyer is on his way too. When the doorbell rang, Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you. I heard them enter, Mom's practiced social laugh, Dad's formal greetings, Emma's bored sighs. Then Grandma's voice, unusually sharp, please, everyone take a seat. Mr. Harrison is here to read George's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer was opening his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable, Mom's perfect smile frozen in place, Dad's face draining of color, Emma's mouth hanging open in shock. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. I, George Walker, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room was silent except for the rustle of legal papers. First came the house, left to Grandma, along with a substantial sum for her ongoing care and maintenance. Then came the surprise that made Emma's face turn red with anger. To my granddaughter, Nellie Walker, I leave my newly constructed laboratory facility at 1420 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research work. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe my ears. Grandpa had built me a lab? My own research facility? The remainder of my estate, Mr. Harrison continued, is to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Nellie and Emma Walker. Emma's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up abruptly. But Grandma raised her hand. There's more, she said, pulling out a letter. Your grandfather wanted this read as well. My dear family, Grandma began reading, her voice strong and clear. I've watched over the years as favoritism has poisoned our family. To my son and daughter-in-law, your treatment of your daughters has been shameful. Each child deserves equal love, equal support. Stop, Emma screamed, jumping to her feet. This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything? Do you know what I had to do? All those hours sitting with that boring old man, pretending to care? Mom tried to shush her, but Emma was beyond control. You promised, she turned on our parents. You said if I played nice, if I visited him and acted like the perfect granddaughter, everything would be mine. You made me grovel to a dying man. The raw truth of their manipulation was finally exposed in all its ugliness. And now what? Emma continued, her voice getting shriller. Little Miss Perfect gets a whole laboratory, and I only get half the money? No. Give me the house. She doesn't need both, she can have her precious lab. I sat there in silence, watching my sister's true colors emerge in all their violent shades. The perfect daughter act had finally cracked, revealing the ugly reality beneath. Well, Mom broke the tense silence. Nellie, you heard your sister. Be reasonable. Do you know how much we've invested in your education? All those science camps, competitions. I almost laughed. You didn't pay for any of that. Grandma and Grandpa did. That's not the point, Mom cut in sharply. Family means sacrifice. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share to Emma. She needs it more than you do. Honor his memory? Grandma's voice cut through the room like a whip. She stood up, Grandpa's letter still in her hands. Let me remind you exactly what George had to say about this family's idea of sacrifice. She began reading again. To my son and his wife, your blatant favoritism has created a poison in this family. Your treatment of Nellie has been nothing short of emotional abuse, while you've turned Emma into an entitled, spoiled. How dare you? Emma shrieked. No, how dare you? Grandma's voice thundered with a force I'd never heard before. You all manipulated and lied to a dying man. You kept his beloved granddaughter from saying goodbye to him. And now you have the audacity to talk about family and sacrifice? She walked to the door and flung it open. Get out, all of you. And Emma? I'm sorry George left you anything at all. You're nothing but a spoiled, selfish girl who learned from spoiled, selfish parents. They left in a flurry of threats and slammed doors. The house felt eerily quiet in their wake. That was 5 years ago. Today, I run my own research laboratory, the one Grandpa built for me. It's everything I could have dreamed of and more. Sometimes, when I'm working late at night, I swear I can feel his presence, proud and loving as ever. Grandma visits often. We have dinner together every Sunday, and she loves touring the lab, asking questions about my latest projects. She's taken some science classes at the local community college, saying it helps her understand my work better. But I think she just wants to share in the passion Grandpa and I always had for discovery. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emma since that day. Sometimes I see their names in my email inbox or their numbers on my phone, but I delete them without opening. They made their choice long ago, and now I've made mine. The other day, I found an old photo of Grandpa in one of his books. He was in his garden, pointing out something to a much younger me, who was peering through a magnifying glass. On the back, he'd written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I keep that photo on my desk now. Not all family is bound by blood, I've learned. Sometimes the truest family are the ones who believe in you, who support your dreams, who love you not despite your differences but because of them,